Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Full Metal Tuxedo podcast. My name is Gregory. Of course, you know who I am. The goddamn star of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. I know it's a little bit later if you're listening live. Remember, I start these as live streams. These are just chill sessions where we all hang out together on Saturday night a couple times a month, talk about crazy stuff. You know, earlier today, a gentleman from the government knocked on my door. I answered, and he immediately asked to see my identification. I was nervous, but I wanted to comply, so I showed it to him. He said, "Thank you," then handed me a bag and walked away. "Thanks, buddy," he said. "What the hell happened?" I asked. I opened the bag, and a pungent odor, quite acrid, wafted out of the bag. I didn't know what to do, so I lit a bunch of it on fire and inhaled as much of it as I could to see what it was. And I don't remember much about what happened after that, but when I started to become lucid again, I spent a lot of time thinking about interdimensional beings. That being said, I also suggest the dispensary on the Mohawk Reservation. Cheyenne-Denaga is just a few miles down the road here. You guys are badasses. Keep doing what you're doing out there. So, yeah, I've been talking about a lot of weird stuff lately. I know I just did a huge series on coneheads, angels, giants, that whole class of strange, human hybrids, whatever you want to call them. If you guys are paying attention to the news, I hope you have been. But Dragon Man, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last week, a giant skull that was found in China. I'm a little bit nervous about where it was found just because I don't know what China's long-term intentions are with it. But, I mean, they are letting people study it, and it is a really big deal. They're still debating as to what it is. It's suggested it could be Denisovan. It does look extremely close to what I think a Denisovan skull would look like. But, I'm not an expert. You just have to trust that I spend a lot of time looking at these fucking skulls, guys. But it could be another subspecies. And I think that if it's anything, it might even be a subspecies of Denisovan, because we do know that there was at least 3 different species of them, which is just like a further complication on what is already a subspecies. I know. But also recently, it's been blasted all over mainstream media that scientists, them powers that be, that have suggested that colder climates, so during the Ice Age period, certain species of human were considerably thicker, larger, and their theory is to survive the elements, which there would be an evolutionary benefit to that. And I think even that's where the myth of the ice giants comes from. These northern Scandinavian people that lived up in the ice that were just very, very large. Ice giants are kind of like almost a universal thing, though. And in China, northern Chinese people are, I know that the convention is that Asians in general are shorter on average, but northern Chinese people are colossal. I used to work with a northern Chinese woman, and she was as tall as I was, and her husband was even taller, and I'm 6'3". There is something to the idea that the closer to the north you get, the tougher you are. Canadians, as nice as we are a lot tougher. We're very tough people. The winter forces you to be tough. Mountain people are tough. Russians, probably the toughest people. uh, in the world, if not pretty damn close. I think the coldest city on Earth is in Siberia, very close to Alaska. I don't recall the name of the city. But yeah, it's feeling good that just all this information just keeps coming out about ancient man and the idea of a larger class of people or a giant class that existed at some point. It feels like I'm being vindicated. And I know that I don't exactly have a ton of skin in this game, but I am just very interested in it. And I love to see just how quickly it's all unfolding. And the Dragon Man skull is a really big deal. But we're not here to talk about that tonight. I promised interdimensional cryptids. Now, I'm not just sold on the idea that a cryptid is an interdimensional being, but it is one of the more interesting theories on what's going on with different types of supernatural creatures. Bigfoot. There was a time that I played with the idea that Bigfoot was a species of human. And I was going mostly on some native groups. Just consider them a tribe of people. So they showed them the same respect as they'd show any other people. So in my mind, because in the earliest time of me looking into this, I was pretty convinced that they were a subspecies of human that just stuck to the mountains and stayed pretty recluse, hard to find. That's not that crazy. Somebody as smart as a human would be smart enough to elude other humans indefinitely and slip up only a few times. But, the more I studied them, the more I realized that they had to at very least be some type of hominid, but not quite human, but also not quite great ape. Definitely past that point, because the feet, were one of my biggest struggles earliest on. I talked about the feet quite a good deal when I talked about Patty the Sasquatch in my 3-part, well, it was 2-part with a follow-up vlog. And Patty, I am still on the fence about. There are times I watch that film and I say to myself, God damn, that is a Sasquatch. And then there's other times I watch it and I just can't believe it no matter how hard I try. I think that there is something to the Sasquatch phenomenon, though. As much as the Bigfoot thing could have started as some sort of a prank that loggers would play on each other, all it really takes is for one of them to be real, for Sasquatch to be real. But what is Sasquatch exactly? The footprints would suggest that it is not quite human because it's missing an arch. So this was the part I talked about in the Patty video that I found really fascinating, was the long arch that goes from the ball to your heel. That one, they believed for the longest time, is what allowed humans to be bipedal. And in my mind, I think, if you want to go to every single museum and demand that they change the feet of every Australopithecus and non-quite human hominid creature, because they just assumed, because they clearly had a bipedal structure to their skeleton, that their feet must also have the long arch. But we don't know that. That's actually complete myth, and what's amazing is it was confirmed only very recently in the last few years that it is the short arch right beneath our toes that is the one that allows us to be bipedal. And that explains also why Patty the Sasquatch in that video does that shuffle walk, because she can't roll off of her feet. She has to lift and plant them almost like a piece of heavy machinery. And she's shuffling along the ground like she's on rails. And she can't run. So if anything, you could argue that the long arch, at very least, gives us the ability to run. But if Patty the Sasquatch is real, or rather, if that video is real, and what we're seeing is something genuine, then what we're seeing is the best possible representation of that thing. Whether we're literally seeing Patty the Sasquatch or somebody doing a really well-rehearsed impersonation, everything about Patty's movement makes total sense in that video. But where did Patty come from? Did she come from the woods? Or did she come from another dimension? Yes. Smoke 'em if you got 'em, folks, because this is going to be one of the weirder episodes I do. I'm not a total cryptid nut. I would be elated to see one, but the amount of time, effort, dedication you have to invest into these kinds of things, it's not worth it to me. I don't want to be that guy that goes out to the woods just looking for Sasquatch all the time. Like, I like nature a lot. I like being out in the woods, but I feel like there's better things I can do with my time when I'm out there. That being said, if Sasquatch wants to come and visit me while I'm out there, bring it, man. I am all for it. I'm excited, in fact. I mean, I always imagined that one day I would see some sort of a cryptid. Mothman would land right in front of me or something. Who knows? Mothman is another weird one. Now, Bigfoot have been seen in the same area that Mothman originated, West Virginia. West Virginia is cryptid freaking central. If you want to discount everything that counts as an alien, and that's like a lot of things, like I'll be quite conservative about that, because there's a couple things I'm going to mention tonight that still fall under the possible alien, you know. But you guys know, if this is not your first episode, I say this all the goddamn time. Excuse me. I believe that there is a clear connection between all those phenomenon, aliens, ghosts, and cryptids. That there's some sort of possible veil lifting or dimensional crossing that's allowing these things to sort of manifest in the three-dimensional here along with us, but only for brief periods of time. I've heard several Bigfoot stories where people say that they saw it and then it just vanished, or it just appeared in front of them. And there are actually several different types of Bigfoot, even just in West Virginia, believe it or not. There was obviously just like your classic Bigfoot. And I think that, I brought that up, that Bigfoot, the name Bigfoot, was trademarked by the man that filmed Patty the Sasquatch. And that was one of those weird red flags about that video to me, is just like how absolutely devoted he was to making money off of it. But okay, there's several different kinds. In Canada, we call it Sasquatch. We don't really think Sasquatch is anything really wildly different from what you would call Bigfoot in the United States. But Sumatra, they've got the Orang Pendek. I know I'm going to butcher all these pronunciations. It's not quite big, and its feet are a little bit more ape-like. It almost seems like just a very smart ape, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with the stories. Australia, very few people know this, but Australia's got the Yowie, which is, again, very similar to the Bigfoot. In many ways, the sightings seem essentially identical. China, they call it the Yeren. Those seem pretty mighty. The skunk ape. Though I think that might be something else. It does sort of also fit the bill, which is a really interesting thing about Sasquatch that makes me think that it is obviously in some way physical, like as in corporeal, like flesh and blood, because a lot of people report a very pungent odor, which is a very smart self-defense mechanism, but it also is sort of a sign of a hunter. So dogs, like if you've ever owned a dog, they love to roll in the worst smelling stuff. And prey animals are not so bothered by the smell of terrible stuff, but predators are. Predators don't want to eat garbage. So, prey tend to just sort of ignore the smell. And if a predator animal can smell bad enough, a prey animal might ignore their normal pheromones or their normal odor and just mistake them for something rotting. And then, of course, the Himalayan Yeti. That's actually one of the first ones. People don't really know that, but one of the first ever footprints recorded was a supposed Yeti near. I don't know if it was near Mount Everest. I don't know why I remember it like that. I have this really weird memory. I absorb things really well, and I tend to just blindly trust the memory that I have, but like almost always I search it and make sure, and I'm almost always right. But it's the weirdest things that I remember, like essentially useless information. You dummies listening at home are allowing me to make all of this useless information that I have stored in my brain a career. So thank you all very much. That reminds me, I want to thank all my patrons that are listening at home. Some of you guys are in the live stream chat on my Patreon Discord server. I have a separate Patreon for Armored Skeptic and for the podcast. But the podcasters get to, a bunch of them essentially get free super chats. If you want your voice heard tonight, super chat is the best way to do it. I read super chats at the end of both segments. And also, if you want to email me your firsthand account of something creepy that's happened to you, a UFO encounter, a Bigfoot encounter, something wacky that you can't explain, you can either record your voice telling the story just like people would on Coast to Coast with Art Bell, we are the spiritual successor. Yeah. So, I prefer voice, but most people write out their story. I guess you like to hear my voice. But, my voice is always basically done by the end of every episode. But I've picked out 4 really tight stories for tonight. So if you stick around to the second segment, I'm going to read some of your stories tonight. And the music, too. I'm sorry I do all these plug sessions, but I gotta shout out Sam Tar, my buddy. Mother of the Void is the song I always play at the beginning. Go subscribe to Sam Tar. Love his stuff. He has a new song out. He just released the music video for it yesterday. Highly suggest it. But I'm going to play another one of his songs in the intermission. But 1 second, and I'm going to get back to interdimensional creatures here. All right. So this is why I re-upload my live streams to the second channel, Armored Skeptic More, so I can chop off all this annoying fat where I have to keep hydrating to save my voice. You know, best voice in the business. Gotta keep it sharp, guys. So, love you guys. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for following. All right. So, yeah, what was I getting at? Yeah, cryptids in West Virginia. So, here's the other thing. Okay, so just in West Virginia, they had the yellow ape, and it had, each of these have very distinct feet, by the way. That's the really interesting part. There was the leaping devil, which sounds terrifying. There was the stone man. Why they gave him that name, I don't know. But he only had 4 toes, supposedly, which is bizarre. The West Virginian Yahoo. I feel like that's what they would call me if I moved out there. I really want to visit West Virginia. There's a lot of really cool cryptid hunters out there, and the whole supernatural community out there is amazing. There's the devil ape, the woodland crooner. Crooner as in like Frank Sinatra, singer, essentially. Apparently this thing would just yelp and sing from treetops. It's bizarre. And there's okay, so we're going to transition here, because this might have been a naked Bigfoot, or this might have been something different. And I think it was something different. The Grafton Monster. Now, the Grafton Monster is truly terrifying. The stories of some of the sightings just absolutely blew my mind. It would sort of appear at tree lines, but it would recognize when people had rifles or self-defense, and it would disappear. What's interesting is this is one of the cryptids from West Virginia that's actually featured in Fallout, or one of the Fallout games. I can't remember which one. I'm sorry. I've never played them, though they do seem very appealing. The Mothman, also featured in Fallout, the same game. Mothman I talked about to death as well. I kind of go through these phases where I'm not a big cryptid guy, I was saying, but I go through these little phases where I get sort of interested in them very briefly. They just sort of enter my mind a bit. Mothman is really interesting. So what's really interesting about sort of the connection between some of these guys is the elusive nature to them. Because the way people sort of describe how they disappear, like, even though there are explanations for some of them, like literally Mothman just flew away, right? That's easy. But there seems to be a sort of elusive nature to the vast majority of these creatures. Almost like they are here 1 second and then they're just literally not even here anymore. If you're a fan of the Newkirks, their Hellier series, in their second season, they talked about Kentucky. Now, Kentucky is where the goblins were, and that was a fun episode. Not a very popular episode, but I really loved making it. I'm very proud of it. This is one where it sort of sounds like aliens, but I remind you, I think that aliens come from the same place that other supernatural things come from, and it's not another planet on another solar system several thousand light years away. At least that's not necessary to explain their existence. So I don't want to like ruin the episode. I highly suggest, if you're interested, if you're like me and you grew up with like any of those haunting shows, ghost hunt shows, supernatural shows, hunting down UFOs or whatever, then you're gonna love the Hellier series, because that essentially it starts off as a hunt for the Kentucky goblins, but they just find out a bunch of crazy shit throughout the 2 seasons. They're filming something now. They were showing it in their Instagram stories. I'm excited. I don't know what it is though. But anyways, the short version is this one man they were interviewing mentioned that on one chart it shows that a certain area of Kentucky resides right over a huge deposit of quartz crystal. And, you know, I think you factor that in alongside the fact that there's like a huge cave system just all throughout Kentucky. But also another chart, he says, shows that the Earth's electromagnetic field also dips down over Kentucky. So he was suggesting that sort of opens that area up to some sort of crossing point for something from somewhere. And that's not really the craziest thing I've ever heard, because you have to admit that there do seem to be places where more stuff happens, and it's not just the moonshine talking. Though, with Kentucky, I mean, there was a lot of moonshine there. West Virginia, on the other hand, I don't know. I had a couple more here I wanted to talk about. Okay, so the Flatwoods Monster. That one sort of, I guess, also could be an alien. Its description was really bizarre. But it reminds me, because it seemed like described to be like metallic, almost robotic, almost like it was on thrusters. And it seemed like an alien's really lame attempt to make a robotic version of a thing that would exist here to interact with us, but not like an actual representation of what they are. And the only reason I think about that is because there was a really interesting alien encounter on a university campus once. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on where it was. I know it was in the United States, though. But you can look this up. Somebody that worked there encountered these very tall creatures that from a distance you would have assumed were Bigfoot. But he said up close, they were robots that looked like they had fur attached to them, like to mimic a living creature, but they were clearly not real. Really, really bizarre story. But again, makes me sort of think that something is building things to send over here that resemble living things. And that's where I get into that idea that alien greys are fake living creatures that are essentially like go-betweens that are created to send through these gateways or to interact with our side or whatever it is. People often describe them as smelling awful as well, but more like sulfur, like they're from the pits of hell. Quite interesting. And stories of people that have bitten them and swallowed pieces of them, and saying that they got very sick from it. Now, that's very interesting. Yeah, and then there's other weird ones like the New Jersey Devil and Bat Boy and whatever. The sheep squatch. It's like this weird rat goat thing. And South Park's Man Bear Pig. For all we know, that exists too. But maybe these are forms that are given life through our imagination. So, you know, what if they're trying to resemble things that would live over here? You know, and like Sasquatch is like an engineered living creature or engineered avatar of some sort. That they're the aliens are like, oh, okay, well, they look like ape people and have hair on them. There we go. There's a 10-foot version of it. They will respect that. Or are these like actually living things that are sort of slipping between? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's one or the other. Right before the Phoenix Lights, I did an episode on the Phoenix Lights a couple months ago. I loved that episode. But the day before the Phoenix Lights, which were seen by like 100,000 people at least in Phoenix, Arizona, in the mid-90s. The night before that, an extremely similar display of lights was seen dancing over a town in Arizona. And when I looked into this town, I found this lecture. I'm going to try to find it for you guys. I'm sorry if I can't. It's actually really obscure, and I forgot to save it. But this park ranger, a native, was witness to basically every possible supernatural event that can happen. And he had really good evidence for quite a few of the stories. As a park ranger, the area where he lived, people could just live out there. So he was sort of like pseudo-police, as well as just somebody that would just make sure everybody's got supplies and they're surviving and everybody's doing okay. So in a way, like a community leader. This guy would have been very respected, and he had a partner too, who also witnessed the vast majority of these things alongside him. And they're both very respected within their community. And they are on a lecture circuit, or were on a lecture circuit for quite some time. In fact, they prided themselves on their obscurity. So you can't blame me too much for not being able to find it in time for the live stream, at least. He started off by telling stories about Bigfoot, but then he moved on to a thing that you may know as the Skinwalker. The Skinwalker is just about the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. The natives don't like talking about it. Please respect the native people of the regions that believe in the Skinwalker, because it is very disrespectful to bring it up around them. But the Skinwalker Ranch, obviously ground zero for some sort of Skinwalker activity. So, what was happening with these Skinwalkers? So this ranger's stories were pretty varied. You know, one story where somebody's just driving down the road and there's something that looks an awful lot like a wolf at full sprint, perfectly keeping up with the car for quite a good distance. That sounded pretty terrifying. But they would also describe finding just animal skins. They even had a few photo examples. So I knew they weren't just pulling it out of their ass. They were like dried out hides that were totally useless. It didn't really look like somebody skinned them to save the hide. But it was like, you know, precision. Or, you know, I wouldn't say that. But it was just very clearly just the hide. That was all that was left. And we're talking different animals, cougars and wolves. Larger bipedal predators. But he also described this very interesting alien encounter where this couple that, you know, a native couple that lived somewhere deep in the nowheres, out where God lives, one night a few little glowing beings that looked fairly similar to an alien gray, but they were glowing green, and they were hovering above the ground. It sounds an awful lot like the Kentucky Goblins, minus having ears. They sort of just floated around the property, and the property, because it didn't have electricity, they used solar lights, and they had a bunch of solar lights out on the lawn, and the aliens would float towards these solar lights, and the lights would turn off, and then when they would float away, they would turn back on. And apparently the aliens found these things quite novel, so they would dance around them, getting them to turn on and off. And apparently he said they also had these laser pointers. I don't really remember what he said they would do with that, but I think they were also playing with the lights with them. So they sort of sound almost like they're intelligent beings, but also just very low vibrational. Like they're not very aware. They're just sort of dumb. I don't know how else to put it. I'm sorry. They're just not all there. And that seems to be a theme with a lot of different cryptid alien encounters, is that they behave almost like they're just not really all there. Some of them appear to be pure evil, and that's why the skinwalker is so terrifying, because the myth is that they skin an animal, take its hide, they live in it as if it's them, and they can enact their power through that. And apparently they kill people and kill things. They'll steal dogs and puppies and eat them even. Where was I going with that? So this show is, my dirty secret is, of course, I don't really properly prepare anything before I start talking. I sort of just ramble. And you guys are locked in to my deluded ramblings, so thank you very much. Yeah, so it was just exactly like the Kentucky Goblins, except of course the Kentucky Goblins, the story was the family kept shooting at them, but they almost sounded like they were playing too. Like they're sort of just dumb, even though they floated in on a UFO, which you'd think like means, oh, they've got a spaceship from another planet. Yet they come out and they act like a bunch of children, just curious about what these big bang sticks are, coming back for more, seeming like they're completely uninjured by being shot point blank over and over and over again. They were just like, they're just screwing around with this family, just playing. Again, very low vibrational. So the suggestion is that this park ranger made was that his lore, his legends say that there are lower realms of reality, and that these things exist in those lower realms, kind of like, almost like hell, almost, which explains why there's so many terribly evil things down there. But it also explains why they're sort of just like not really all there. They're just not very self-aware. They're sort of detached and not engaged, whether that's by design or they're relinquished to that realm because they're not capable of anymore, or they choose not to be capable of anymore. I don't know, but it does sound an awful lot like the sort of thing that a lot of religions talk about, these veils between realities, between the highers and the lowers, that are supposed to separate us because we're not supposed to interact with each other. And that's by design. That's by, the design of creation. And, angels are those glowing lights above our heads that dance around, that everybody says is a UFO, or a UAP is the new vernacular, which I love, because I don't think most of them are physical, though they can manifest that way. I always point out that UFOs from the 40s look like they were built in the 40s, and UFOs in the 2000s look like they were built in the 2000s. And part of that is because, yes, obviously, we would hoax things to look how we would picture the future. But also, that tracks with my concept of, are they creating things in a way that they think that we would see as familiar? Because they're trying to show their uniqueness to us, but they're doing it in such a way that we can relate to them. And if something was a higher being, and that's the scary one, is some of these could be fourth dimensional beings. Now, if a fourth dimensional object tried to peer into the third, we would only see a three-dimensional representation of it. We could never see the whole thing. And in the fourth dimension, we look the same way. Like, from the moment we're born to the moment we decompose in the ground, that's all connected as one string, one solid object in the fourth dimension. But we see it as cross-sections of time, like snapshots. And we know that time is flowing because we have memory of the past, and we have knowledge that the future will come. And we trust that, and our memory, we can trust that because our memory tells us that time continues to progress. We are in the fourth, but we don't see the fourth, we see the third. So if a fourth dimensional being tried to peer in, we would not see the whole thing. We'd see some weird, bizarre representation of it. It might even just look like a blob. So if it's trying to relate to us, it might try to make that blob look like something we would recognize on some level, yet know that it doesn't actually belong here, so that we would know that it's from somewhere else. And maybe these things are trying to communicate to us in that way. Maybe in their heads, if we can see some familiarity in them, it will spark some connection between us. The Mothman comes to mind because a lot of the stories, even though the people who saw him were absolutely terrified, one woman falling on her child and running into the house both covered in blood, screaming at the top of their lungs, like that, the moth didn't actually do anything to her though. It was just curious. It was just watching her, trying to figure her out. She even said it cocked his head like a bird would, like he's trying to get a better view of her. A lot of the stories of the encounters were very similar, where it sort of just land on the hood of a car and look inside and then fly away. It was curious about us, but it didn't want to hurt anybody. And I always like to bring up with Mothman, even though it's always depicted as black with moth-like wings, the eyewitness accounts described it as being grayish or whitish, and the wings being very bird-like with feathers. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why people also thought that it could be an owl. And I did make that argument in the skeptical part of my Mothman two-parter there, that the owl is the most likely culprit, even over Project Blue Book trying to cover up some secret technology, which is, well, that's one of my more favorite theories, honestly. I really love deep diving into that, finding out that, lasers, I forgot to mention it in the video, but lasers had only just been invented right before that, but the general public didn't know anything about lasers. They barely knew they existed. They only knew them as like sci-fi weapons in crappy movies. Like Star Wars hadn't even come out yet. We're talking pre-Star Wars. People didn't know shit about lasers. Meanwhile, somebody's got big red eyes. And so I found out like that they would have been doing laser experiments at that air base north of there, because the inventor of the laser fucking worked there. So chances are that was some sort of flight suit or ejection suit or possibly a jetpack suit, and the pilot was wearing goggles, red laser protection goggles, and they were testing some sort of, they were doing all sorts of crazy shit back then. It was the Cold War, so they would have been testing ways to blind pilots with lasers. They were doing that. They're fucking evil. Well, and they probably, they probably had good reason, because there were Russian jets flying over top all the time. I mean, they were both kind of being dicks to each other, let's be honest. Yeah, so that was a really interesting find. And then also that stealth jet that they were flying out of that airbase, there were no photos of it from that time period. When they finally declassified it, I found that there were a bunch of really interesting hints that they would have had the same glass that, laser protection glass, essentially, as the glass for the cockpit. And there's a lot of hints inside the jet to suggest that that's exactly it. And either that, or it was designed in such a way that somebody wearing red goggles, the same red goggles, laser protection goggles, would be able to see the equipment very well. Yeah. Hit me up if you're an expert on jets and you think I'm right, because I think I'm right. How much time do we got? Oh, we got a couple minutes. I don't have much more to say on the cryptid thing. But I do find the interdimensional thing to be at least interesting. I know it is one of the more wacky and bizarre theories that I've suggested on here, but I just can't shake that possibility, because it does at very least explain how elusive these things are. And if you just go through the list of how many of these things there are, it's like, even if you want to get down to the dumb ones like Bat Boy, all these things can't just exist in nature, because there would have to be an entire species of them to explain their existence. So evolution demands, as it were. So the scientific approach would be to suggest that these things, if they are individuals truly, then they must come from somewhere else where they were either created or there are species of them. That's really all there is to it. You know what? If you want to fight me about it, I'll give you my goddamn phone number. No, I won't. I'm not going to dox myself. So, yeah, once again, if you want your voice to be heard on the show, a super chat is the best way. I'm going to read off a couple super chats here. If you guys have sent them in, I'm sorry I haven't actually loaded them up yet. Another argument for why I need to edit these. I know I'm always a couple episodes behind. I kind of get inspired from time to time. Cancer Incarnate. Oh, that sounds terrifying. Thank you for the super chat, bud. Ooh, a Canadian, of course. Been a big fan of your channel for a while. Bought some merch a while back. Still wanted to give you something else as appreciation for your content. Love these podcasts. Thank you, Cancer. I appreciate that. And Bad Dragonite. Ooh, tough Pokemon. Thank you for the super chat, bud. Says, what are some cool Canadian cryptids you like? Rarely hear about Canadian specific ones. Well, there's actually a serpent, supposedly, that lives in Lake Ontario, and they even refer to it as the Kingston Monster sometimes, or the Kingston Serpent, or the Kingston Dragon. I don't know anybody that's seen it, but there are 5 to 10 distinct stories that suggest that there was some sort of sea animal that would appear. And what was really interesting, you got to look up how staggered the appearances are, because it almost seemed like a pattern. I don't remember what that pattern is off the top of my head, but I do remember being amazed. It was almost like it was a regular occurrence. Also, apparently people see Bigfoot prints not too far from me. Only like an hour's drive north of me here in Ontario, which sort of blows my mind. But we've also got the Wendigo up here. I know that people talk about that in the United States as well. And there's a good deal of discussion as to what that could be. That could be a type of skinwalker, or that could be a type of zombie. I remember arguing that that's even possible, that they literally could be literal zombies, which is terrifying. Yeah, so I'm going to play another Samtar tune here. Maybe two. I don't know. I'm going to play his new one. I know. I've got my two favorites I play every night, but he did ask me to play the new one. So I'm going to play that for you guys, and then I'm going to come back, rest my voice, finish trying to figure out what this government man brought me in the stinky bag. And I'm going to read 4 stories. And if you guys send me any more super chats, I will read those as well.
The shadows aren't your friends, and the ghosts, they'll pretend. When we're lost in a world that don't belong to us, we'll try and make a sense in things that aren't us, and we'll wonder why we don't speak.
That was The World Isn't Yours by Samtar. Most of his tracks are multi-layered. He has drums, guitar, keys, and bass, and even multi-track vocals, and he does it all. Every single one of them. Absolute legend, that man. But if you're listening at home, you guys are all legends. I love you all. Thank you for tuning in again. Thank you to the patrons listening at home. Okay, so I promised some stories for you guys. If you want to send your story to fullmetaltuxedo@gmail.com. If you want to be called anything other than the name that shows up in your email, make sure to start your email off with what you want me to call you. Yeah, and tell me your first-hand or second-hand account. I prefer first-hand accounts, but I've gotten a few really interesting second-hand stories too, so don't be nervous to tell me something that your dad told you, or, you know, somebody you trust. Like, make sure it's somebody you trust implicitly, and it's not just some bullshit story your friend told you after you've had a few beers together. But yeah, every single story, every single night, I've read several stories that were absolute bangers. Hello, Greg. My name is Rob. I loved your content since 2016. I used to be an atheist, and your videos were a big help with me in navigation of that. But either way, let's get started. First will be aliens, then my religious experience. I would like to say that I'm not trying to push my religion on anyone. Believe what you want. So he titled this, Seeing the Same Type of Aliens and Meeting the Gods. That is interesting. That's funny, Rob, because I know that a lot of you guys have noticed at home that, you know, I used to blast, I used to absolutely rock hardcore the Armoured skeptic character as like a hardcore atheist. You know, and I think even at my most atheistic, I was still very respectful towards religion. I just was not very respectful to people who would push their religion. And I think the thing I still love most about atheists is that they recognize that the whole organized system is absolute crap. Definitely not a fan. But, yeah, I've come to a little bit more of a open-minded belief or open-minded exploration of that side of my head, that side of my brain, that side of, my heart, whatever you want to say. So I absolutely appreciate that, I know that a lot of you guys have always been Christian or religious or believers the whole time you were my audience. I remember from day one, I always had believers in my audience. But it's so cool that so many of you guys have stuck around after I made that big transition to this sort of more open-minded discussion, as it were, on these more, a little bit more bizarre subjects that normal people don't like to, because it is a huge transition. So it's so cool that so many of you guys came over, and a bunch of you guys are new as well, which is really cool as well. But yeah, it's been awesome that you guys have encouraged me and come along on this journey with me. I love that I'm not doing it on my own, because it makes me feel less crazy at very least. All right, so Rob says, so this happened to me and my fiance. Ooh, lucky man. We lived in Las Vegas, and we're actually watching a lot of your videos, which was causing us to have interest in looking up in the sky one night. We were in the backyard looking up at some star formations that were odd, but that were perfect triangles, just 3 dots. Ooh, that's interesting. We were doing this for some time. Everyone else in the house had gone to bed at this point, considering that it was near 1:30 a.m. 13:30 o'clock. I noticed that my camera, when zoomed in all the way on one of the formations, the camera would completely go crazy, bouncing up and down. The picture itself looked like it was being disrupted. And at first, I thought nothing of it until I looked at the full zoom at something else and saw that it was much more stable than when I was looking at the stars. After a while, we would put our phones down and went back to back out for one last look. It was all the same. Sorry, you guys know that I'm dyslexic. Half of this show is about forcing myself to not be dyslexic anymore, and you are the victims. Yeah. So yeah, one last look at it was all the same until all of a sudden we see 3 yellow orbs in a triangle formation spiraling through the sky about 100 feet above the backyard. Me and my fiance raced back inside as quick as we could. I don't know what I saw. I just know that they were 3 yellow orbs. They stayed in the same formation as they went across the sky. They made no noise, disrupted no trees, and were gone in an instant. Well, you know what? Your story was so well written that even I could read it well. That was an amazing story. Okay. I actually ended up seeing something like that again at my friend Jesse's house a few days ago. We were in the backyard and I looked up and all I saw what was like a yellow highlighter streak across the sky, incredibly high up and very small. After telling this, my fiance, she started looking around and saw the orbs on the other side of the house. I don't know what those orbs are, if they're alien or spiritual. I just know what I saw was very real. Very cool. I mean, I would wonder if that streak wasn't just a shooting star or a meteorite. But it is interesting that you got confirmation on, location of orbs and everything. All right. Now he's going to push his religion. No, I'm just teasing. He did promise he's not going to. Now talking about my religious experience. Like I said earlier, I used to be an atheist until my friend Jess introduced me to paganism. Oh, yes, a lot of pagans. That's very interesting that I'm attracting a lot of pagans. I know some witches and some pagans and some pagan witches. And let me tell you, they are interesting people. Love them for it. I later introduced it to my wife, and now all three of us do pagan rituals at Jess's house. That's interesting. There's two rituals that stand out to me as the most supernatural. So something I have come to understand with the gods is that they don't owe you anything. Well, ain't that the truth? Well, not entirely true. There is one god that has that technically owes you something, but that's a story for another day. I later introduced it to my wife, and now all three of us do pagan rituals. Yes, I read that already. So, okay, so something I have to come to understand is that gods don't owe you anything. You don't owe them anything if you don't want something from them, and you have to give them an offering. Yeah, obviously you do. You have to offer these things. Yeah, it is like a bargain. It is a deal you make with them. You have to build a relationship with these beings that want to be family. It's not the same as Christianity. The Vikings had a completely different way of viewing the world when it comes to religion. Yeah, I really like the show Vikings for that. That in the first 3 or 4 seasons of that show are absolutely incredible. And then after Ragnar dies, well, even I would say before he dies, it's not even worth watching after that. But, that's me, the entertainment critic coming out, not the historian. It is, they do go into a lot of the pagan rituals. And what's interesting, too, is they show how offended Christians were by observing them. Because they are pretty disgusting, a lot of blood ritual and stuff like that. But, okay. Back to Rob's story here. All right. The first ritual we did that was unique, supernatural, was one to Thor. Okay, starting off with Thor. We're given the offering and the alcohol, and I had said, "Hail Thor," really loud. The wind was blowing east, and after I said that, "Hail Thor," I could see what looked like a cyclone come across my friend Jess's house, barrel through the trees, actually splitting the branches, and half as it went through and went right into the fire, causing the embers to fly into my face. It was very magical experience. I love embers blowing in your face is a very magical experience. And I can't explain it considering the wind was going the other way and was looking like I had a mind of its own. I mean, that is very interesting. I mean, that could have happened entirely on its own. I mean, cyclones do sort of just do that. That even happens in Canada. I've had embers randomly fly in my face when the wind changed direction like that. However, the timing of it happening right after you say "Hail Thor," that's got me interested, I'm not going to lie. The other ritual we did was to Freya. I've talked to other people in the community who are pagan, and they're not entirely sure who I saw. So with our ritual circle, we generally leave an empty space for the god or goddess we're honoring that night. I went to adjust the fire, put a log in or whatever, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a blue dress with a blue cloak, white with black dots, and the lower half of a face, not much detail for some freckles and a smirk. Just freckles and a smirk. Interesting. Her hair was red. I saw all of that for only a second. After the ritual was over, we all sat down at the table to discuss what we felt and whatnot. It was at that moment that I realized that me and my friend Jess saw the same being at different times and different angles. I'm not exactly sure what I saw, but for now, I believe that I'm on some form of a right path to thank. So thanks for reading. All right. Well, that is very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Yeah, the idea of these like lower gods or nature gods or elemental gods is very interesting. And I think, yeah, definitely something to that. I mean, if even the Bible warns against them, so that at very least confirms their existence. Regardless, I'm not going to get into an argument about whether they're good or not. All right, gonna go on to another story here. 1 second. Thank you for your patience. Hello, my name is Daniel. I'll call you Dan. Before I get to the story, I want to say I've been a big fan since 2016. I swear I didn't pick these stories because they both start with people saying that they've been fans since 2016. That was really my peak though, wasn't it? That was a beautiful year. Though, you know what? Some of my most humiliating mistakes were in that year as well. So let's not relive the past. Thank you for the fan love, though. I love to see you go off on topics and have enjoyed the new direction of the channel. Wow, you guys said the exact same thing. So now for the story. I'm sure this fits the bill. I've debated whether to share it or not for a while. I'd classify it as a religious experience, even a miracle perhaps. For some context, I was raised as a Christian, but not really church-going household, and over the years I'd become quite agnostic. That's fairly similar to my story, more or less. To me, religion just seemed like a framework to keep society functioning in olden times and not much else. Yeah, well, when I read the Bible for whatever, the third time when I was like 27, I guess it was, when I decided to leaf through it again, that's when I just totally became dispelled with religion and Christianity and Judeo-Christianity at least, because it just seemed like the perfect way to subjugate people. Like the whole thing was just a pattern on how to subjugate a lower class of people under you. It's like, and you know, it was used, like that's something that's brought up too with, you know, it was used to justify slavery. It was like, it almost is like, was used as a tool to justify oppressing people all throughout history. So anyways, about 5 years ago, I was in the lowest point of my life. Overweight, no plan, a tangled mess of dysphoria, depression, and anxiety. I was suicidal. That year, I was in a mortal car accident. Thankfully, no one else was involved. The car was scrap, and everyone said it should have been fatal, but at the time, across the road from where my vehicle had flipped, an off-duty EMT was eating lunch. Wow! What are the chances? That's insane. They were able to get help, and I needed immediately, and may have saved my life. That's interesting. To this day, I don't know who it was. However, the event left me gravely injured. I spent all summer in hospital bed, mainly due to my foot being crushed. Ooh, that's rough. I'm so sorry to hear that, bud. Autumn of that same year, I was in physical therapy and had gotten into a habit of going on night walks to think and get some practice walking again. Oh, good for you. Good for you. I'm glad that you stuck with your rehabilitation. I'm sure that wasn't easy. My neighborhood was in a pretty isolated patch of hilly forest. I remember feeling hopeless often during these times, as my injuries had left it hard and painful to even walk. Specifically, severe arthritis and scar tissue in my subtalar joint. Wow. I know, I can't pronounce that word. Subtalar joint in my left foot. One warm October night, I walked down to one loop of the road, dotted with trees. Inside the loop and around it, the wind had begun picking up and the air felt electric. I know exactly what you're talking about. I love that feeling. I feel absolutely alive right as a thunderstorm is about to roll in. I could tell that a storm was rolling in. The wind continued to pick up. Trees swayed wildly around me when I noticed the trees inside the loop were perfectly still. Wow, that's interesting. This felt odd, and I realized that the trees around the loop were all swaying in and out towards me, and if I were at some kind of focal point, wow, as if I was some sort of a focal point, then flashes of lightning and thunder chimed in. But like the wind, they appeared all around me, but a patch of the sky directly above me was perfectly calm, and the air was still. I was mesmerized. I have no idea how long I was there. The sense of time vanished, and I felt overwhelmed with positivity. That is insane. It felt like a raw power swirling around me, but yet I felt calm. Then reality came back as it began to rain on me. Ooh, wow, this is very vividly written. I really appreciate your writing style. I'm living this with you. Like the rain washed over you like a bucket of cold water splashed in your face, and it woke you out of the dream. God, dude, you should be a writer. Not wanting to get soaked, I began heading home. At first, I was limping, and then the rain gradually changed into a downpour. I broke into a hobbled jog, and then at that point, I felt so light, as if it instinctually, I broke out into a full sprint. I hate to compare that to Forrest Gump, but that does invoke that miracle moment when he realizes that his legs work just fine. That's incredible. Every single muscle in my leg burning for the first time since before my accident. Effortless, full heel to toe running, up and downhill. I felt like I was flying almost. I covered about half of a mile, maybe a bit more, in no time at all. Oh my God. This is like the best story I've ever read. This is a perfect example of what Art Bell would say is, if you're going to write a story or tell me a story, it better be true. And if it's not, it better be convincing. This is that story. Even running all the way up the driveway, I made a lot of progress. in my recovery and have most of my mobility back. That's interesting. Good for you. But to this day, I still can't run like I did that night. Oh, wow. With the limited joint flexibility and range of motion, it's damn near impossible. I took it as a sign that I could still do amazing things with my time here on Earth. And it reignited my faith in a higher power. Wow, that's really interesting. That's incredible. Some people said I must have a guardian angel in order to survive my accident. And now I think that night was something or someone making its presence known to me. That is incredible. It didn't match the typical MO of a guardian angel according to the bits of research I've done, but I feel my survival and this event are connected. I'm not trying to convert anyone, as I've only shared this story with a handful of people. I trust it's rather personal, and I thank you for your time. Wow, that's absolutely beautiful. You know what? I know it's premature, but I might be given that story of the month. Wow, that's one of the best stories I've read on the show so far. Thank you so much, Dan, for sending that in. I really appreciate it. All right. 1 second as I rehydrate. This one's a bit shorter. This one is from Erica. Hi, Gregory. My husband, Travis, listens to your podcast, Full Metal Tuxedo, and I've listened to a couple of episodes. Well, I'm glad you managed to slug through, too. That means a lot to me. Travis suggested that I send you a recording, but retelling my phone call from the grave. That's what I call it. You can call it whatever you wish.
Hi there. My name's Erica. My husband Travis is the one who listens to your podcast, and he said that I should send you a voice recording of something that happened to me a while back. It happened when I was married to my previous husband. It was about 2001 to 2003. That's when we were married, so it was sometime in there. We were married and going to have a yard sale for this woman, Betty, and her mother. Betty was an older woman, probably 50s, 60s, something like that. So her mom, obviously was older, 70s, 80s. And she was going to live with Betty because she's getting up there in age, needed people to take care of her, whatnot. And so before we were able to have that yard sale for her mom, Betty was over at her mom's place, just relaxing in a rocking chair. And her mom went to the other room real quick, came back, and Betty had passed away in that rocking chair. Nobody knew why. They didn't find out until later that she had heart problems that she had only told her daughter-in-law about, but her daughter-in-law never told anybody. So we didn't have her mom's phone number or anything. We just contacted Betty about it, and we're just making the plans through her. So, we were thinking, like, how are we gonna do this? We don't know where she lives. Anyways, I was getting ready for work one day. It was like 6 something in the morning, and the phone rang. This is before cell phones were widely available, so it was a landline. And the answer machine picked it up, and I was like, well, I'm just getting ready for work. I'm just gonna let the machine pick it up. And I was in the other room. I couldn't really hear much. So when I'm getting ready to walk out the door to go to work, I see the thing beeping, and I go to play it, and it's just nothing. Like if someone just hung up and didn't leave a message on a machine, then there would be, it wouldn't even register that there was a message on there. That's how answer machines work. I don't know how old you are or how old the listeners are and stuff like that. So that's how answer machines work, okay, people? So anyways, it said there was a message, clicked play, nothing there. No static, like, most people would be like, oh, there was static because it's a ghost. Anyways, there was nothing there. And so I did what most people did back in the day, and I star 69. Star 69 is when you call the person who had just previously called you. So an old lady answers the phone when I do this, and I'm like, hello, who's this? She says the same, hello, who's this? And so it ended up being Betty's mom, and it was just really odd. She didn't understand how I got her number, and I said, well, I didn't have your number. I did star 69 and explained to her what it is, and she said that that's impossible because she's been outside in her garden all day and she hasn't even looked at the phone. She hasn't been on the phone, nothing. So it's just really odd. I don't know. Betty had to have done something so that we can help her, and it worked because we ended up having that yard sale for her, and we had no other way to contact her. So it's just really cool. I mean, it's not some spooky ghost story or anything, it's a helpful ghost story. But it's pretty cool. I heard from other people that Betty visited them too, especially the daughter-in-law. I heard she terrorized her daughter-in-law because she didn't tell anybody about the heart condition she had. And Betty was stubborn, she wouldn't go to the doctor and stuff like that. But I mean, even stubborn people, anyways, I don't know much about that, and that's just hearsay. But mine is not. Mine happened. And it was very cool. We were very glad to have that yard sale for her, given it was a bunch of old crap that nobody really wanted. But we got about $50 for her, so that was nice. Well, I hope you like my story. Yeah. If you did, that's cool. If you didn't, it's cool too. But thanks for listening.
Wow, thank you, Erica. I did love that story. You have to thank your hubby for putting a fire under your ass to send that in, because that was really good. Know what I really like about all the stories tonight? Even though there's tragedy in each one, they're all like positive vibes. All giving me lots of smiles and laughs. And how quaint. The end of that story is the yard sale was successful. So beautiful. All right. And you know what? I'm going to do one more. This one's ultra short, guys. And then if there's a couple more super chats, I'll read those. And then I'll let you guys enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. It's about 11:30 p.m. here. So it's almost time to rock and roll. So this one's from Rohawk. That's a sick name. Greetings. One day, right into the story, my dad and I decided to go to the Pine Barrens of New Jersey for a kayaking trip in the creek there. If you don't know, the Pine Barrens are notoriously creepy in appearance, and the water there is tinged crimson from some kind of mineral. Ooh, that sounds so ominous. I have to go to the Pine Barrens now. Though that means I have to go to New Jersey. And I did technically promise myself I was never going to go back to New Jersey. But I didn't really write that down anywhere. So I don't know. I might be able to make an exception for this. My dad was driving an old Honda Fit while I was sitting in the passenger seat. We were driving on a dirt and sand road. So we were already on the edge, about getting stuck somewhere. Up ahead, there was a single tree that had fallen exactly perpendicular to the road. The truck had been hinged and splintered. Oh, interesting. The windows of our car were down as well. As the car approached the fallen tree, we both witnessed something dart out from behind the stump. In less than a second, it was gone. I distinctly remember 2 leaps or lunges and a reddish-brown blur. I couldn't even see it because it moved so fast. It also made no noise at all, which still gives me chills to this day, because our windows were down and we weren't listening to music. My dad and I exchanged glances, and without a word, he put the car in reverse and backed out through the whole trail. Oh, God, that's fucking perfect. God, guys, you guys are bringing some amazing stories tonight. Thank you. I asked him about this later, and he said he actually saw it peek out before it lunged. Good luck with the nightmares. Rohawk. Rowan. Thank you so much for that story. Thank you for the stories, everybody, tonight. God, those are incredible stories. That's amazing. But you can see I picked that one because it sort of proved my point about how they're silent and elusive and they literally just disappear in a second. That doesn't sound like an ape or a human. It sounds like something that's not really supposed to be here. It's amazing. I love it. Thank you so much, everybody. So, okay. Did you guys send me any super chats? I should have checked. Now, if you didn't send any, I'm embarrassed. Okay. Dragonite, Bad Dragonite sent me another one. Thank you very much for the second super chat. Follow-up questions. Do cryptids in Quebec have a French accent? Love the podcast. Yeah, you're goddamn right they do. Yeah, we don't like to talk about the Quebec cryptids for that reason. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. I love you guys. I hope we had another good night together. Ooh, 11:33.